My dear Vicky, I'm trying to talk to you.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to ask you, are you sure you didn't want to go home too? I didn't give you very much time to consider now, did I? I should hate to think that you're just staying for the sake of an old man.
Doctor, I made my decision. I wanted to stay. Anyway, I wouldn't have anything to go back to.
Yes, your father was...
Did you hear that?
Yes, perhaps it's something fallen down, or maybe we change course.
There's someone in the living quarters.
Hello and welcome. Okay, that was just laugh over me. Fantastic. Best joke ever. Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, it's Scott, and I'm speaking to nobody at the moment.
Well, if you're speaking to Dan. If you're watching this on YouTube, my webcam is not working at the moment, and so I just have my Discord profile picture, which is a GIF of Dan saying, "What's the point of being alive?" Because Evil Dan is the best Doctor Who meme, and he's the best companion. So that's why he's my profile picture.
Should I turn off my profile? Should I turn off my video so I can be Tom Baker?
No. Oh, you've just made my entire Discord I can't... You've ruined the video. No one will be able to see this, because I can't have it full screen if no one's got a camera on. Brilliant. It's just excellent.
Good start to the year.
This week we are kicking off our gimmick for this year, and our gimmick this year is we are going to be looking at every incarnation of the Doctor in chronological order. So that of course means we are starting with the Fugitive Doctor from Chibnall's era. No, we are of course we are starting with William Hartnell. This is chronological order for us human people, not in the Doctor Who timeline. So
I guess we are technically covering the Fugitive Doctor at some point. She turns up as a ghost in Power of a Doctor, which we're covering again, maybe.
I don't know
what we're doing
for
Jodie Whittaker. Maybe we'll put it up to a poll.
Yeah, or we'll just choose like her worst episode, which is the one with the finger guy in your ear. This is the worst episode I've ever seen in my life.
I think you're just confusing it with some porn.
But this week we are looking at the William Hartnell story, The Time Meddler. This is a end of season 2, at least it is on ITVX. I don't know if it was the end of season 2 in the actual show or not. And this episode first aired on the 3rd of July 1965, which was a Saturday, and a shocking 57 years, 6 months and 8 days ago, over half a century. At the time, the US president was Lyndon B. Johnson, and the UK prime minister was one Harold Wilson. Things that happened on this day was Wimbledon's women's tennis. An Australian called Margaret Smith beat Maria Bueno of Brazil 6-4, 7-5 in her second of 3 Wimbledon singles titles. You may be asking yourself, why am I talking about tennis on the 3rd of July 1965? And that's because literally nothing else happened on the 3rd of July 1965. It was a slow news day. But this tennis thing came up twice, so I'm guessing, hey, look at that, it's probably interesting. But can you guess? And I would be honestly so ridiculously impressed and probably assume you were cheating if you could guess what is the number one at the box office on this 3rd of July 1965. What are people going out to the cinema to see?
Spider-Man. No.
No, they are going to see the Yellow Rolls Royce. I'm surprised you've never heard of it. The Yellow Rolls Royce is a 1964 British dramatic composite film written by Terence Rattigan and produced by Anatoly D. Grunwald, sorry, pronouncing names, and directed by Anthony Asquith, the trio responsible for The VIPs, another movie I've never heard of. Apparently adapting an idea from In Those Days, a 1947 German drama by Helmut Kautner that had its US premiere in March 1951. The Yellow Rolls-Royce uses a yellow 1931 Rolls-Royce Phantom II to frame a story of 3 very different owners, an English aristocrat, a Miami gangster, and a wealthy American widow. It's set in the years up to and including the start of World War II. And like I was like, oh, that sounds like kind of interesting. And then like it was like it got tepid reviews. So it's probably really boring.
And I'm gonna guess it's one of those films that goes on for like 3 hours as well.
Oh, probably. I didn't even look up the runtime. But it's from the 60s, so I assume that it does. Hang on, let's find out. The Yellows, Royals.
I'm gonna guess 2.5 hours.
2 hours and 2 minutes.
Oh, that's short.
Yeah, it's pretty short for a 1965 movie. That's not too bad. After this movie, this was only in number on the box office for about a week. It was then taken over by what was it? It's like What's There, Pussycat or something. It was like the name of a song that apparently is a musical.
Right, this song written by Tom Jones.
Probably. Hang on. I was gonna write it down, and then I was like, I don't care, and now I'm talking about it, so I must have cared.
I'm guessing the movie came first, or...
There it is. What's New, Pussycat? Yeah. What's New, Pussycat is a 1965 screwball comedy film directed by Clive Donner and written by Woody Allen in his first produced screenplay, starring Allen in his acting debut alongside Peter Sellers, Peter O'Toole, Rob Schneider, Cappuccino.
So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Basically, Tom Jones wrote the song for the movie, but obviously the song outlived the movie.
Yeah, much more popular than the movie. Yeah. I've never seen the movie. You know, Woody Allen's a bit yikes. As far as people go. He did. Before I found out he was yikes, I did see a couple of his movies, and they were like, oh, this is fun. Yeah. But then you realize that all of his movies are him falling in love with a girl in New York when she's 20, and it's okay when it's his first movie and he's 20. It's less okay when it's his 19th movie and he's 86 and the girl's still 20.
Yeah, I think the only movie I've seen of his is Ants. The movie where he's an ant and Kevin Spacey kind of bullies him around.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's a super.
Great cast.
I don't know what it is, but Ants has just been a prominent part of my life these past few weeks. It keeps coming up in conversations I'm having with people, and I don't know why. I'm getting haunted by the movie. Like,
it's not a good movie.
No, it's not, and it's just following me around. But if we turn our eye back to history to see what else was going on the 3rd of July, in 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, the largest battle ever fought on the American continent, ends in a major victory for the Union during the U.S. Civil War. In 1928, John Logie Baird demonstrates the first colour television transmission in London. I thought this was very interesting because obviously they did not have colour TVs in 1928, yet they did have the technology to produce them. It was just extremely difficult and not very efficient. In 1985, Back to the Future, directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Michael J. Fox is his evil cousin, and Christopher Lloyd is released.
My favorite movie of all time. So
really
great choice. Yeah,
I think
amazing. My
favorite movie of all time is Labyrinth. I
never could get into Labyrinth, to be honest.
I love Labyrinth so much. In 1989, the movie Batman sets a record for the quickest $100 million ever gotten that quick. It took 10 days for Batman to make $100 million, which nowadays, I think 10 days is still pretty commendable to get 100 million, but you would kind of be looking at like, oh, okay, it's not doing super well to make 100 million in 10 days, you know? Like, I think like Avatar 2 made 400 million in 4. Like,
yeah.
In 1996, the UK House of Commons announces that the Stone of Scone, or Scone if you're posh, also known as the Stone of Destiny, used in the coronation of Scottish and subsequently English and British monarchs, will be returned to Scotland after 700 years in Westminster Abbey. This is just an interesting bit of history, and also reminded me of Scone Palace, which is on the way from Aberdeen to Edinburgh. You drive past the turn up to it. I've never gone up to Scone Palace. I only ever see it and go, fuck, I hope they sell scones, because I love scones, but I know they don't, so I want to just imagine that it's like just a palace full of scones.
I know nothing about this.
And then in 2005, the national law legalizing same-sex marriage takes place in Spain. Look at Spain being so ahead of 2005. It was almost 10 years before other countries caught up with that.
Still shockingly late, you know.
Yeah, 2005 is still late, but that's ahead of everybody else. Like, that's crazy.
And you know what else happened in 2005?
My 5th birthday.
They brought back Doctor Who.
Yeah, they brought it back for my 5th birthday.
Yeah.
It's superb. Other than that, that is all I've got for the On This Day segment. So why don't you take us into a bit of the writing up segment for the Time Meddler?
Sick. Yeah, the writer of this episode was Dennis Spooner. He was born in 1932, and he briefly became a professional footballer before joining the Royal Air Force in the 50s. After that, he wound up doing office work, in which he met and married his wife in 1954. He grew tired of his office work and wanted to break into the entertainment industry by creating a double act with Leslie Darwin. However, they soon found that there wasn't much money to be earned in that field, and Dennis was about to become a father, so he decided to see if his talents could translate to writing television. And also, another famous writer of Doctor Who was a failed comedian, was, of course, Terry Nation, and they became the best friends as well. Terry Nation famously was told that he would never be good at comedy by a critic, and that his talents laid elsewhere, which turned out to be good advice, because obviously Terry Nation created so many amazing television shows.
And none of them were funny.
Dennis Spooner would start his television career in the late 50s by selling some half-hour comedy scripts to the BBC comedian Harry Worth. I don't know who Harry Worth is. All of this is lost to me, because we're not old enough, obviously. Soon he began to write for a small handful of ITV shows like Coronation Street. Everybody's heard of Coronation Street. It's still on the air today. Who watches Coronation Street when?
Never, because I've never seen an episode, and I'm never gonna see an episode because I'm not an 86-year-old person.
One thing about Dennis Spooner is that he was quick to make professional relationships. In the early 60s, he made one of the most important partnerships that would last his entire career, when he befriended Brian Clemens, who was a producer on The Avengers. And Spooner actually wrote a couple of episodes of The Avengers in 1961. The Avengers is a show we should cover someday.
I was gonna say also for because we have like at least half of our audience listens from the US. When we say the Avengers, we don't mean like the Avengers. We mean the Avengers, which is a much more British like spy drama, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a spy drama. It came out roughly around the same time as the Avengers, the comic strip. Like Avengers, the comic strip was like 2 years later, so I guess Stan Lee stole the title from the TV show, because I think the Avengers was popular in America in the 60s.
Interesting.
At least.
But yeah, it's also the reason why the Avengers movie had to be called Avengers Assemble over here in the UK.
Yeah, it's because of the 1998 movie that was a remake of the TV show. It's all complicated. We should cover the Avengers someday, because there's a lot of Doctor Who personalities who wrote for that show, and also
I love
Sidney
Captain
Newman.
America.
Sidney Newman, of course, created both Doctor Who and the Avengers, so we should cover it someday. I'm saying we really should.
It'd be an interesting look into something I have absolutely no idea about.
Dennis Spooner was also good friends with Jerry Anderson, and this led to him writing 9 episodes of Fireball XL5, 13 episodes of Stingray, and 6 episodes of Thunderbirds, all in like a 3-year period, which is a lot of television. And do you know anything about Jerry Anderson? Have you ever watched Thunderbirds?
I have watched Thunderbirds. I kind of liked it when I was a kid, although I much preferred the live action movie as a child. Well, you got to remember, it came out I think probably before I was born. You know, so I was very young when I saw it, and it was dumb fun. But I had Thunderbirds toys. We used to have like the rockets and stuff as a kid and things like that. We watched some of the puppet stuff as well. I've since gone back to try and watch like some of the classic like puppet show, and Jesus Christ, it's the most boring show I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, the problem with Thunderbirds with me was always it was 15-minute long episodes. That's almost an hour, which is
and 45 minutes of that episode is watching a hole in the ground slowly open and a rocket come out. Like,
I will say it does have one of the best theme songs ever created.
Oh, yeah.
That theme
Oh,
song
yeah.
is amazing. I've never seen the movie, but I think it's so in the year 2000, basically they remastered all the episodes, and there's a big Thunderbirds craze again. Obviously, the movie was made because of the craze, because we wanted to make more money out of the franchise, and the movie was famously panned. And they never did anything with Thunderbirds after that, apart from the CGI TV show in like 2013. But
yeah, I think
the movie really killed Thunderbirds.
I think there's actually another TV show on the go today. I think there is still an animated TV show of Thunderbirds.
I think it's called Thunderbirds Are Go. I think that ended a few years ago, and I think David Tennant is a voice in it as well.
TV show modern. Let's find out. Thunderbirds Are Go, TV series from 2015 to 2020. Yeah, so ended just as the pandemic started. That's a shame.
Yeah, but as a kid, I had the Trace Island toy. That toy was ace.
Oh, I don't think I ever had the island. I only ever had the rockets.
Yeah, I think I was too young for Thunderbirds because I don't really remember too much of it. I was like 2 years old when it started to become popular again, so I don't really have too many memories of it.
Yeah. See, I was just super cool, and like it probably was not popular when I was getting into it as a kid, but I liked it.
So Dennis Spooner joined Doctor Who in April of 1964, which was roughly around the time, like 6 months after the show started. And this was when Terry Nation dropped out of writing the third story for season 1, which is understandable that Terry Nation would want to jump out of writing a third story because he had written 13 of the 42 episodes that season, which is insane.
That is so much.
I know, it's the workload these people went through. It's unbelievable. Obviously he was good friends with Terry Nation, and he recommended him, so which is good to hear. Spooner wanted to write a sci-fi story. However, David Whittaker, who was the script editor at the time, wanted him to do a historical episode instead, and that historical episode was the Reign of Terror. Sorry, I don't know why I had a big blank there. What have you ever seen the Reign of Terror?
I don't think I have. It doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, it's a partially missing episode, but it's a pretty decent episode, I would say.
No, I've never seen it. Never seen it. If it's classic Who, you're probably better off just assuming I haven't seen it.
With David Whittaker leaving at the end of the Daleks' invasion of Earth, Verity Lambert saw Dennis as the perfect replacement. Spooner introduced a lot more humor and characters having an emotional bond throughout the series, which wasn't present in previous stories. For example, the Romans had a lot of scenes with Ian and Barbara kind of teasing each other in a way. And I know you've definitely seen the Romans.
Yes, I have seen the Romans, yes.
Yeah, do you remember a lot of their banter together?
I not overly, because I like the Romans is fun, but for me, especially season 1 Doctor Who, I check out quite heavily because I'm like, God, this is bad.
See, the Romans is season 2. I think
season 2
is
yes.
worse than
Season 2 is worse than season 1 for sure. But the Romans,
for starters, it has
the web planet.
Web planet.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the Romans is fun, but for me it's too many episodes, and it ended up being like, I was like, okay, come on, stop, you're so come on.
Yeah, but the Romans caused the program to be more popular with the public. It gained the highest share of the series, which is surprising to hear. I guess people just wanted more relationship stuff. Spooner only lasted 6 months as script editor, working in the position from the rescue to the chase. He left the job because Terry Nation again offered him the job as co-writer and assistant editor on Nation's show The Baron, which aired between 1966 and 67. Spooner was very eager to work on the show because it was an American co-production and he wanted to break into the American market. However, the Baron didn't perform as well as expected because ABC in America decided to stop airing the series halfway through the 30-episode run. Which
Classic,
is a shame.
classic move, classic. It's like what Fox did with Firefly, you know, where they were like, we're gonna air the episodes out of order and at different times every week.
Oh god, yeah. Famously, they aired episode 2 first.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
just incredible, just incredible.
That show was doomed from the start. It's a great show. Have you actually seen?
I have.
Firefly?
I watched through
Great.
I've watched through Firefly. I think maybe twice. It's been a long time since I have, but it was when I was like 13, 14 and really in love with Joss Whedon before he turned out to be a huge creep. You know, and I was like, oh my god, Joss Whedon's the greatest writer ever. God, Firefly's so good. You know, it's never coming back though. It's never coming.
Yeah, especially with Joss Whedon. You know.
Yeah, I know.
So Dennis Spooner would still write episodes of the show with the Time Meddler. Time Meddler coming after he left the show as the script editor. He also assisted Terry Nation by writing half of the 12-part Daleks master plan because obviously that is too much for one man to handle. 12 episodes. That's insane.
Yeah, that's so. And I bet most of them are not good.
Oh god, I mean most of them are missing, so I've never had a chance to sit down and probably watch the whole story from start to finish. But yeah,
I don't think any story needs to be 12 episodes. I mean, look at Flux. That was even too many episodes for the lack of story that there was.
I mean, Dalek's master plan does have a place in like the fandom's heart. It just got referenced in the Power of the Doctor, where the Master says,
the Master's Dalek plan. Yeah.
And even Russell T Davies is mentioning that there's going to be brief mentions of Dalek Master Plan in the new series, so it's going to be interesting to see.
Interesting.
Dennis Spooner would return briefly as the script editor for part 1 of The Power of the Daleks, as the crew at the time had difficulty writing Patrick Troughton's first ever episode. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like a lot of the characteristics of the Time Meddler kind of got transferred over to the second Doctor. Do you know what I mean?
I could kind of see it. You know, I've only seen the first 2 episodes of this story, so for me, the Time Meddler is a monk who has binoculars and cooks fried eggs. So I haven't really gotten a full gauge of his personality because, as we'll go into with this episode, these first 2 episodes of the Time Meddler, basically nothing happens. So I'm still. I'll know more next week when I'm more introduced to this character. But I could definitely see snippets of like, oh, okay, that is a bit second Doctor-y right there, you know, because he does feel. He's got that same type of energy. It could just be the actor, you know, as well, just giving a similar type of performance.
Yeah, the performance does feel like an overgrown school child, which was the intent with the character, and it just feels like it got transferred over to Patrick Troughton. After Doctor Who, Dennis Spooner still wanted to make it into the American market, so he decided to co-create 6 shows between 1967 and 1973, which... One of these shows was created with an Avengers writer, Richard Harris, while the other 5 was co-created with Monty Berman, who was also a producer on the Avengers, I think. None of these shows lasted more than 2 seasons, however, but they were still popular enough to get good DVD sales, like 3 decades later, which is pretty good legacy there. The most known show to audiences today would be Randall and Hopkirk Deceased.
Never heard of it.
Which is a show... It's a show about a detective and his dead partner who is a ghost. It got remade in the early 2000s, and it had a lot of recognizable Doctor Who talent involved, such as Mark Gatiss, David Tennant making guest star appearances. Tom Baker is a star of the revival, and Murray Gold did the music for the revival.
Interesting.
I've heard of it. I've never actually seen it.
It sounds like something we should cover at some point. It's very Doctor Who connected.
Yeah, in America, Randall and Hopkirk Deceased got renamed to My Partner's a Ghost, which is the worst title
that's
ever.
That's the most American rebranding. I love the thing with studios where they give Americans dumbed down titles. It's like Le Mans 66 in America, Ford versus Ferrari.
I know. Because when that happened with Ford versus Ferrari, I was like, Did they make 2 different movies based on the same premise or something? Because nowadays it doesn't feel like it should be done nowadays, because obviously the internet exists, people will know the original title. It feels weird.
Yeah, I know. And Le Mans 66 is a much better title than
It is.
Ford v Ferrari. Like,
At least make it consistent, you know.
yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
In the 70s, he exclusively became a freelance writer, mainly working for Brian Clemens, his good old mate, on shows like Thriller and The Professionals. In the mid-70s, the Avengers came back, and we're talking about the British Avengers, not the American Avengers. We'll cover the British Avengers someday, but it came back as it was called The New Avengers, and he decided to write 9 of the 26 episodes, which is, again, a huge amount of episodes. He only wrote it because it was being sold to American audiences. However, the series did not get a good reception in the States and only lasted for 2 seasons between 1976 and 77. Which, yeah, that's a lot of Avengers, to be honest.
That is a lot. That is a lot for sure.
In the 80s, as his health worsened, his work slowed down significantly. He only wrote for 6 episodes of TV between the late 70s and 1986 before he died of a heart attack at the age of 53 in 1986. One of his final scripts was for the hit American show Remington Steele, which starred Pierce Brosnan, and obviously he finally made it with a big American show, because that show was massive in the 80s apparently.
Don't know if I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, but he died at the age of 53. That's just too young.
It's also it's another Doctor Who person dying in his 50s.
Yeah, it's super sad. He is still recognized and beloved for his contributions to science fiction and spy fiction today. Everyone who knew him at the time would describe him as a quiet but kind man who loved his work, which is 53 years old, and he still had a huge legacy, like creator of 6 shows.
Yeah.
He wrote like 20 Doctor Who episodes. That's so much. The director of this episode is Douglas Camfield, who was born in 1931, and he grew up dreaming of working at the Walt Disney Company. However, he never achieved this. His career in television started out with him working as the assistant film editor in 1955 for the BBC. He then climbed the ladder from assistant floor manager to floor manager. Then he became a production assistant to Waris Hussein, who was the director of An Unearthly Child and Marco Polo. So Camfield was a Doctor Who person from day one.
Yeah.
Camfield directed some of the action scenes in these stories. His first full directed episodes of the show was parts 3 and 4 of The Giants, as the prior director had to leave his duties because I think he was ill or something. However, this was a complete disaster, as the higher-ups considered the 2 episodes to be too flabby for transmission, and they had to trim the 2 episodes down to create 1. And if you know anything about Classic Who at this time, you know it had to be bad to be considered too flabby to edit it down to like 1 episode.
Yeah, because it gets real bad. Like, so for the producers,
it's an okay story.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
You have seen it,
have I? Have I?
Yeah, it's yeah, you definitely have it. It's at the beginning of season 2.
God, I don't remember it.
That's because you spent like a whole year on the web planet.
That's because it sucked. I didn't want to watch it. Like,
the episode is okay. It's solid. I think it kind of falls apart at the end, which I'm not saying it's his fault or anything, but I do like in Doctor Who they gave him a second chance, you know, because this was unprepared. He didn't have any time to prepare anything, so I'm glad they kind of let him off. He learned quickly from his experience and continued to direct more episodes throughout the 60s. He directed The Crusade, The Time Meddler, The Daleks' Master Plan, The Web of Fear, and The Invasion. His greatest contribution to the show was to cast Nicholas Courtney as a Brigadier, which is famously one of the best characters of the entire show. That casting choice is just amazing.
Yeah, that's some pretty iconic casting right there.
He returned to the show in the 70s to direct Inferno. However, he was only able to direct the first 2 episodes before suffering a heart attack. Barry Letts had to replace him. He got better from his heart attack, obviously, because he returned to the show 5 years later to direct The Terror of the Zygons. and then The Seeds of Doom, which would be his final story, as he wanted to leave the series on a high note and wanted to go on to more challenging work. He would also be one of the faces that appears in The Brain of Morbius, his Morbin Time, as one of the Doctor's previous incarnations, which Chibnall made canon 40 years later. So he is one of the Doctors, one of the fugitive Doctors.
Interesting. Well, look at Chibnall messing with canon, even still.
Outside of Doctor Who, he would direct episodes of Edcars, Van der Valk, The Sweeney, Blake 7, which is made by Terry Nation with professionals, and a lot more shows. He sadly died at the age of 52 in 1984 after suffering another heart attack. The Caves of Androzani, which we're covering later this year, is directed to his memory. His colleagues describe him as a joy to work with and a constant professional. Again, just another man who died way too early.
Yep, Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who anyway, cursed. It's a cursed show.
Oh God, yeah. So yeah, as this year we're doing each Doctor episode, each Doctor in chronological order, one story from each Doctor. And why did I choose this episode? Well, number one is it was noted by the production team that the pure historicals weren't the most popular stories with the audience, and the Time Meddler is the first historical episode to have sci-fi elements. Dennis Spooner really wanted to shake up the formula, and the new script editor Donald Tosh loved the premise. And in a Doctor Who magazine interview, he would say, "One of the very first scenes which I saw being recorded before I took over officially as editor was from an episode of A Chase. The Daleks landed aboard Marie Celeste in their time travel machine. No one knew why all the crew had jumped overboard, but now they did because the Daleks landed there. I remember thinking how clever that was, and that was the sort of thing I wanted to do with Doctor Who. Up until then, there were basically two different kinds of stories which had been done. The historical stories set in the past, and the science fantasy stories set in the future. I wanted to blur that distinction, and the Time Meddler was our first attempt to mix the two. It was a mold breaker." And yeah, just basically 80 episodes, and we never thought of the idea of, hey, how about sci-fi elements in historical episodes?
Yeah, I know, it's mental. It's also something that I did really, like, I super dug episode 1 of this story more so than episode 2, because it feels so much different than other Hartnell episodes. You know, this episode is actually like, oh, there's something interesting going on. You know, that there's an interesting little vibe going on of this, you know, and it's something that we will see throughout Doctor Who now, where you go back into the past and there's something from the future there. You know, like that's just it's now been done to death. But you know, this was so exciting to watch.
Now that it's been done to death, I would love a pure historical again, because every episode has to have a sci-fi twist on it.
I was about to say we've had a pure historical, but we haven't, because like even Demons of the Punjab had weird aliens in it, and the goddamn
Rosa.
Yeah, the Rosa Parks episode had the random time traveling Nazi that didn't need to be there.
I feel like Rosa could have had like another Time Meddler, you know, not the Time Meddler because I don't think he's racist, but you know, like another Time Meddler.
Yeah, it could be. It's definitely a character that I'm surprised has never come back.
Yeah, he did come back in the Daleks Master Plan for like 2 episodes, 2 of the Dennis Spooner episodes. I think he comes back in Big Finish,
but like he's never
associated with the 8th Doctor.
He's never come back in modern Who, is what I'm saying. You know, he's in the modern incarnation. We've had like basically everything else back at this point.
I mean, we haven't had any Time Lords back apart from the Master. I feel like
that's not true. That's we've had every Time Lord back technically, like twice.
Okay, I guess we had Rassilon, but he's sat around in the dark room.
And the random like mare dude that Capaldi punched into a different lady. You know, he was a Time Lord. That was in Gallifrey. Okay. Like the Doctor's mom. I mean,
I mean Time Lords like Omega or other Time Lords, Virani.
Yeah, but you know, most of the Time Lords are just boring people. We do need more Time Lord villains for sure.
You're a boring people. Another reason I chose this episode is because it's the first time where the Doctor meets another Time Lord, but this is Susan. It's amazing it took 80 episodes for a Doctor to meet someone of his own species.
Mm-hmm. It's also like 80 episodes is so many episodes for the first bit of lore to really come through. Like,
yeah, by this point, the Doctor Who wasn't even like 2 years old. 80 episodes in less than 2 years. That's insane.
Jesus Christ.
It also saw the first time that every companion to the Doctor had changed, proving that the show could introduce a rotating cast of companions, and that's one thing that Dennis Spooner really wanted to do before he left. Because obviously now that it's been done, every character could be changed. Even the Doctor now, which is wild. It's like the only show where the entire cast could change at any time.
It's not even like it's what's made Doctor Who continue for so long, but it's not even the cast that just changes. The entire crew can change, and the show just keeps going.
Yeah.
Like the show just keeps changing hands and changing people. Like it's a completely different show now than it was a few years ago. Yet somehow it's the same show. Like.
Yeah, it's just mental to think about. Like, in terms of canon, the low quality special effects is still part of the same show.
Yeah, I know. Like.
It's really weird. So this episode initially started on the 11th of March when Verity Lambert urgently needed a 4-part story to be completed by the end of the following month, which is like a period of 6 weeks.
Oh my god.
However, every writer of the show was currently busy on other projects, meaning that she could only assign Dennis Spooner to that slot, because obviously you can't bring on somebody new to write an episode in 6 weeks. That's insane. You'd never be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
However, there were rules at the BBC resulting in story editors being unable to commission an episode, so Lambert really had to fight for superiors to get this episode made. It turns out she might have done that for no reason, because soon after this, Spooner obviously handed in his resignation, so I guess in the end it didn't matter. The Time Meddler had to be made really cheaply because the prior story, The Chase, was a really expensive episode that required new sets and actors nearly every single episode. And you watch this episode, you never really think that this episode is made cheaper than any other episode. I think the quality of this episode is really solid.
I think, for the most part, even the camera work in this episode is better than most of the other episodes. I was super digging this because it feels small scale, because it feels like a small scale story where you're super interested in who this Time Meddler dude is, and I think it worked with the budget it's got completely well. It does not feel out of place. Like when they're like walking around an obvious set, it's probably less obvious than it is in the bigger budget episodes. Honestly, like.
Yeah, we'll cover more about the set, but I think it looks really solid. It looks really solid for the time and the budget and everything.
Yeah,
and it holds up considerably well compared to other episodes. In creating the monk, Spooner started to study the show's original Bible to create the monk, realizing that the antagonist to the Doctor should be the opposite to the character. The monk should be mischievous because the Doctor is high-minded. The monk should think differently than the Doctor, because the Doctor is always like... The Doctor is a character who believes that time shouldn't be rewritten, and that's like his most famous quote from the Aztecs, where Barbara wants to change the inhumanity of the past. And the Doctor's like, you can't rewrite history, not one line of it, which is a really good character dilemma to have.
It's a good line.
And obviously nowadays, I guess the Doctor kind of changes history all the time, because I think in the Romans even, the Doctor accidentally creates history. Which is really... So yeah, the monk was imagined as an overgrown schoolboy, and the year of 1066 was chosen because it was the most famous year in British history and was known to all school kids at the time.
Jesus.
And now I don't know anything about that year.
They do not teach that in school anymore.
Oh god, I can't even remember anything I learned in history class, to be honest with you.
Well, I stopped taking history in 3rd year.
Yeah.
Maybe even 2nd year, because I'd start doing geography instead. So.
Yeah, I could never get any of history facts inside of my head. I never had any interest, but now I wish I took interest, mainly because I want to understand Doctor Who a bit more.
Well, it's never too late, Scott. You could read a book.
That sounds like for nerds. That's nerd talk. So yeah, this episode was actually missing for years. 2 years after this, in 1967, the BBC erased all master copies of the 405-line videotapes.
Classic move. Classic move by the BBC.
I know. But they continued selling the 16mm recordings to 9 different countries like Australia, Singapore, Zambia, Barbados, New Zealand. The final story this place would wind up is in Nigeria in 1973. However, sales dried up by the late 70s, and in 1977, the BBC got rid of all their copies aside from episode 2. In 1984, the Nigeria copies were found and got returned to the BBC in 1985 when they sat around collecting dust for several years.
Amazing.
These copies had some missing footage, however, but it was mostly complete. In 1991, the team behind BBC Two Arts magazine The Late Show proposed the idea of showing repeats of Doctor Who, and they restored all 4 episodes apart from one 12-second sequence, which we'll get to next week, because that sequence was entirely missing. I think Ian Levine, who is famous for being infamous, found the complete copy, so we have most of the episode found now. But basically, this episode 1, for example, was missing like the entire opening sequence of trying to find Stephen in the TARDIS. It basically opened up with Stephen sitting on a chair and the Doctor offer him a cup of tea or whatever.
Compelling stuff.
The story was eventually broadcast again in 1992 and got a consistent rating of 2.5 million viewers an episode. And the 3 of the 4 episodes even made it to the top 20 viewed show on the channel of the week, which is pretty decent for a decade old repeats of a show that was cancelled less than 2 years ago.
Yeah,
like it showed that there was still some interest in Doctor Who. The original title of this episode was The Vikings, but they changed their mind on this because they realised they had 5 Vikings and 6 Saxons. So the next working title was The Saxons. And then they called it... And then they decided to call it The Time Meddler. I've got it here in my notes. The Time Meddler.
The Time Meddler is a much better title than...
It is.
The Vikings or the Saxons, you know. It's way more interesting.
But who was Prime Minister at this time?
God, I said it a second ago.
Harold, Saxon,
Harold Wilson. He was
Saxon. But yeah, now we can watch the episode.
Damn, that was one hell of a deep dive. That's probably one of our longest deep dives in a while. That was thorough. But yeah, let's jump in to episode 1 of the Time Meddler.
Now, if Harold is king, and Edward was laid to rest at the beginning of the year, then it must be 1066. Yes. Judging by the appearance of these leaves, late summer. And a balmy night. Oh, thank you, my dear. Thank you. You know, it's a bit stupid of me, but we are in Northumbria.
Yes, of course we are. Why do you ask?
Oh, nothing. I just that I wasn't sure whether I'd crossed the border or not. Yes, it's a bit tedious of me, isn't it? But you must have patience with an old man.
Oh, please, sit down and rest before the fire. You must be tired after your journey. Forgive me, I have things to do before Woolnoth returns.
I will, and thank you indeed, thank you. Yes, it's a great pity that Barbara isn't here. Now, if my memory of English history serves me right, we're about to have a Viking invasion, and very soon. And let me think, Harold came north to defeat Hardrada, the Norwegian king. Yes, now that was before he faced William the Conqueror at Hastings. It's all very interesting. Yes, that's very, 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 very interesting. It's going to put that young man in his place.
So the episode begins with a goodbye. As well, I say a goodbye. More of a like I can't believe they left. as Vicky, the Doctor's companion, is wandering around the TARDIS as the Doctor's fiddling with the controls, and the both of them are just lamenting that Barbara and... Oh my god, my names are leaving my head right now. I know it.
See if you... Yeah, go on.
What the hell's wrong? Oh my god, he just showed up again. What's wrong? Ian, Jesus, Ian. Barbara and Ian... that they've just left the show. Now, what caused them to leave? Because I've not seen the story previous to this one.
Basically, every episode, they really want to go home, and eventually, in the last episode, we basically wind up in an adventure where the Daleks have their own time machine, but actually works. And at the end of the story, they're like, yeah, this is our chance to leave. We can go home. And at the end of the episode, it's Ian goes, London, 1965. Which is the most famous quote of 62, I'd imagine. But yeah, that's how we get back home. We go for the Dalek time machine.
Interesting.
It's a lovely way to end our characters.
Yeah.
Arc.
Yeah. It also leads.
Obviously the Doctor is just heartbroken at the change here, which is really a really nice character arc, really nice character touch for him, because the first time we saw the Doctor, he wanted to kill a caveman in the head with a rock.
He also...
Do you remember?
Also, it's nice to see him actually sad that a companion's leaving, and not just like, you flirted with a guy, get off my ship and never see me again. You know, like, he was not upset at Susan leaving at all. You know, he encouraged it.
I mean, he was.
He encouraged it. He is the only reason it happened.
So Hartnell was also bad at reacting to change, much like the Doctor. This story had a new Trillin producer in the crew, and William Hartnell found the change unsettling, so he apparently threw fake tantrums to get his own way on set, telling the crew members later on that he was just joking, which sounds like, yeah, I don't like William Hartnell as a person, man.
He does not sound like a good guy, does he? He sat, but
no,
he seems very much like a man of his generation. He's of a man of his generation in his stature as well, where he is like a world famous actor. I don't know how world famous he is, but at least a British famous actor, which at that time was the world.
Yeah, he was pretty famous. You know, he was in a lot of movies throughout the 50s and 60s. I think moving to television was like a whole new thing for him, because obviously television was viewed as like a less superior art form, and also he was working with these like 20-something people, as in 20 aged people, you know, they're like 20 years old. Like Verity Lambert, who was a producer, was like 27 when she took on the role of producer. Jeez, which is insane.
That's crazy.
To think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was really working with these inexperienced people, and he kind of grew grumpy and tired of them eventually. And even though he kind of had he liked them, but he just had his moments of just hating them as well. Which
plus, he was he was a big racist and anti-Semite. So but
so many good things rolled into one.
It's great.
Actually, we skipped over the title of this episode. The title of this singular episode is called The Watcher. The original working title was The Paradox. I like The Watcher better because the monk spends the entire episode just being a watcher, and then he drops his watch. He does, which really works.
He does drop his watch. That's some good funnies right there. But the episode does continue with a very sweet moment between the Doctor and Vicky, where he asks her if she wants to stay, because Ian and Barbara have left, and he's upset at that, but he doesn't want to keep Vicky here when all she wants to do is go home. He wants to make sure that he's not keeping her against her will, and that she's here to have adventures with him. It's a very sweet scene.
Yeah, Vicky rightfully points out there is really no home for her because, oh god, I just watched The Rescue recently, but I don't remember a single thing that happened. I think her dad dies in that episode, and it's a whole mess, that episode.
Amazing. But then they hear a noise, and Vicky's immediately like, "Oh my god, it's a Dalek! Let's kill it with our shoes and jacket." And it's a very strange. I don't understand their plan, because they kind of creep up against a wall. Vicky takes her shoe off to hit whatever comes. The Doctor takes his jacket off and hides behind it. What's he gonna? Is he gonna throw? Is his jacket so heavy it's gonna trap whoever it throws on?
It reminds me of the end of the Demons that we covered like 2 years ago now.
Jesus Christ.
But at the end of that story, the Master throws his coat over Benton's head, and Benton just falls over. Like I think we made a joke of, oh my god, it's him thinking that it's night.
He just goes to sleep. Yeah, it's like a bird.
Just quickly, what do you think about the TARDIS in this episode? I like all the little props they have. Like the episode opens on Vicky looking at the clock on the wall, and also there's a chair with a panda on it.
I think
I like all the props in this TARDIS.
I think that this is the most interesting the first Doctor's TARDIS has been, because it feels like there's stuff, like there's like a living room that there's somebody going in and out of, there's these doors in the background, there's the chair, the Doctor's doing stuff on the console, there's the clock, there's these things around it that make it feel like a lived in space and not just a big empty studio with a thing in the middle,
Yeah, I like a more domesticated kind of TARDIS. It feels like a living room. It just it's for home. I mean, they don't allude to that enough in the show.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But then the Dalek, quote unquote, comes through the doors, and it turns out it's not a Dalek, but a man called Stephen. Now, I've never heard of this man called Stephen, nor have I ever seen him before, but I assume he is from a previous episode, because everybody else seems to know Stephen, and he was like, I was walking through the jungle, and now I'm in the TARDIS, and I'm all tired.
So the episode before this, he was introduced in The Chase. Peter Purves was actually in episode 3 of The Chase as the American Sightseer, but he was cast as Stephen very last minute as they struggled to find another actor, and Verity Lambert was impressed with his range, so she casts Peter Purves in episode 6 of The Chase as Stephen Taylor, who was an astronaut, and he's also a prisoner on the planet Mechanus, and the Doctor and the companions meet him, and eventually he runs out of the jail, and we don't see him again, and then obviously we find out that he escaped into the TARDIS
and just got super lost inside the TARDIS, which is kind of a terrifying thought. I've never had this thought, but imagine you sneak on board the TARDIS, which has infinite rooms, and you're just trapped alone, forever exploring a place that is changing, and you've no idea what's going on or how to get out of it.
I think that's how Tegan first discovers the TARDIS, because I think her aunt gets killed by the Master, and she's like, I gotta call for help, and she sees the police box, and she just completely wanders in, and she's like, there's like a room with like a forest in it, and she's just like, what the fuck is going on here? None of this makes any sense.
That's a good concept for a horror episode without the Doctor in it, like from the perspective of the human wandering into the TARDIS and getting completely overwhelmed and lost.
Oh my god. Just an episode about a group of people trying to survive in the wilderness.
It turns out they're in the TARDIS.
Twist is it's the TARDIS. Like the Doctor just walks in his pajamas or something.
But the TARDIS appears at a beach, and at that beach there's a monk with the world's spinniest sky behind him as he stares down. And he's like, oh my god, I can't believe this thing appeared. And I assume if you didn't know about the Time Meddler going in, you'd be like, that monk's mind has just been blown, because he's just witnessed a police box appear on the beach out of nowhere. But his mind has not been blown. He's like, I recognize this. I know what this is,
One of the things that Douglas Camfield really wanted for this episode was to do a projection of the sky, and it really works for this episode. Like most episodes, this entire episode is set in a stage, and I think having a forced projection of the sky really makes it feel like it's open, even though it obviously isn't. It makes it feel like it's real.
It's insane the difference of having a moving background does instead of a still back. Like I think back to like the Aztecs or something, when the Doctor comes to step out on the hill and it's very clearly a sheet that he's looking at, and he's like, wow, look across that landscape, and it's like, that's not a landscape, that's a flat wall. But having the like Time Meddler look down from a cliff, and behind him is this moving sky, you're like, oh, he's outside, even though the sky moving makes no sense. Like, it's insane, trippy looking, but it's kind of like cool and stylized. Like I dig it. I kind of want to see it in more things. It's such a cool visual style.
It certainly works a lot better, because just in the last story, I think in The Chase, they're running around in like a big desert place, and you can see like the corners of the wall, coming together. And also, like, the floor is just like carpet. It's just like a big rug that's being thrown on the floor. Whereas here, it just feels more believable. But this is, for the longest time, the first 3 minutes was missing because it mentions so much about Ian and Barbara having laughed and all that. I think it was cut because like Australia didn't have the rights to do the first 16 episodes or so this was like the first episode they got in terms of the show, so it works a lot better having it open a lot later, where we're explaining the concept of the show rather than lamenting the goodbye of Ian and Barbara.
Yeah. But after that, Stephen ends up waking up and drinking out of the world's smallest glass of water as they catch him up on what's been going on. And there's some really fun back and forth here between Stephen and the Doctor. I like the chemistry. I think I just like Stephen as a actor and as a character because he's got good chemistry with everybody. He's got good chemistry with William Hartnell. And he's got good chemistry with Vicky, whose real name I don't actually know.
Maureen O'Brien.
Jeez. Where the he calls the Doctor Doc, like our real dad Graham, and the doctor's like, don't call me Doc, grr, which leads to a fun joke where Stephen's like, oh, okay, Doctor, haha, which it's really rare, I think, for jokes in the 1960s to still be funny 50 odd years later, but there are multiple jokes in this episode that still land. That and most of them come from Stephen. Like, yeah.
And there's a joke later on where Vicky gives the initials of the TARDIS, which is only the second time the initials was given out on screen. Although Maureen O'Brien makes a controversial mistake by saying dimensions instead of dimension singular.
Time and relative dimension in space. Time and I think it's dimensions. I would say dimensions. Time and relative. Although
it's the other way around because the first time it's dimension.
Yeah, I know, but like
Susan's
an idiot, But like I'm saying, like, if I'm thinking logically about the name, time and relative dimensions. Yeah. Time and relative dimension in space doesn't really make so much sense English wise. Yeah. Time and relative dimensions in space makes way more sense because you're moving around. You're not just in one spot. Although I suppose relative dimension, you could just be like the TARDIS is in one spot and moves the universe around it. But we know that's not true because we've seen the TARDIS fly. So.
But Stephen's reply is IDBI, which is I don't believe it, which is a really funny bit,
It is very fun, and he doesn't believe it's a time machine either, and the Doctor's like, nah, it's definitely a time machine. Don't worry about it. And then we cut away to the more boring part of the episodes, of really across the story, which is the Saxon stuff, which is. There's people and they're like, oh, let's go into the tent and get our weapons to go hunting or go across the beach because Vikings could be coming. And it's just like, I don't care about it. I want to see more Doctor and more Time Meddler, please.
Everything around the Doctor and the Time Meddler is absolute shite. It's just so boring. I can't even pretend to be interested in it because none of the characters are presented in an interesting way.
That's what makes episode 2 so hard because episode 1 you have this intrigue of who is the Time Meddler. You've got the fun stuff with Steven. You've got like, oh look, the Time Meddler's like cooking an egg. This is so weird. And then in episode 2 you've got a lot of the Saxons. Like they're front and center for that, and it's like, oh boy, this sucks. But they step outside of the TARDIS and the Doctor picks up a Halloween costume, which he tries to convince Stephen is a genuine Viking helmet, but just as an actual historical fact, Vikings did not have horns on their helmets, and what the Doctor is holding very much looks like a Halloween costume. It is the crappiest looking helmet I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, even Steven's like, yeah, this is probably like a kid's toy or something. Of course you would think that because it's not real.
Yeah.
But, you can't blame them for not knowing that. I guess maybe even if they did know it, like the classic helmet with the horns is like the most iconic thing about Vikings anyway. So it's not the most.
It's not accurate to history at all, but it's weirdly like part of Viking lore is like they have horned helmets. I don't know where that even originated from. Probably just stories that got exaggerated and misinterpreted throughout history. But yeah, it's interesting enough. This is also where we get a reference to the chameleon circuit, where they're all talking and Stephen's trying to understand how the TARDIS works and why it looks like a police box. And Vicky's like, well, it shouldn't, and the Doctor's like, it'll look like a rock if it's on the beach. It's just broken. And Vicky's like, he's going to fix it someday, which of course he will do, just a long time away from now.
Yeah. In Attack of the Cybermen, which was like 20 years later.
Yeah.
Which we actually covered that episode. It's not good.
It's not. That episode's called They Fix the Chameleon Circuit, which it's worth watching because there's good moments.
Yeah,
I think there's good moments in it. But yeah.
There's certainly good moments. But this is the only the third time in the show when it's explained that the ship is supposed to change shape, which is interesting, which is like 80 episodes in, it's only explained 3 times. Of course, I think the new script editor wanted these kind of lines to be thrown in because obviously I think his idea was, I want people to be up on date on what Doctor Who is before I start my run, which makes a lot of sense, I would think. But I guess most people would know Doctor Who by now.
Yeah. It's also so strange how many episodes came out and how little of those episodes actually dealt with expanding the lore of the show. Like how much of them were just let's have an adventure through history or in the future and not worry too much about why or how, especially with Classic Who, it's like drip feeding you, like world building. Oh, here's a little bit more world building. Oh, here's a little bit more world building. Just every now and then. Yeah. Just it's such a strange way to build a show, which is probably the reason why there's so much inconsistencies in Doctor Who.
We don't even hear the word Time Lords until like 200 episodes in, which is at the end of season 6, at the end of the War Games, which is absolutely insane to think about. 200 episodes,
6 seasons. So that would be the equivalent of like what, Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, end of Matt Smith. Yeah, that'd be middle Matt Smith. It'd be middle of Matt Smith because David Tennant was 4 or 5. Oh, it'd be end of David Tennant then. 3, yeah, because he was 2, 3, 4. He was 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. Matt Smith was 5, 6, 7. So it would have been middle of Matt Smith. Imagine that middle of Matt Smith's run. He goes, and we're Time Lords. You'd be like, what?
What also we have in this scene is a rare exception to the rule. William Hartnell usually flubs his lines, where Peter Purves actually flubs his lines, which is interesting. He says, if it had landed on the pebbles, referring to the TARDIS. William Hartnell snaps back with, on the what? Purves corrects himself by saying, if it had landed on the rocks. So that's William Hartnell reacting to somebody flubbing their lines, which is really interesting to watch. It's really fascinating to watch at a little moment. In the commentary, Peter Purves says, he did bully people who didn't think he was up to the mark. And certainly when he got things wrong himself, he would take it out on the others. So that's another story of William Hartnell kind of being a nightmare to work with.
Yeah. I can imagine, somebody like Hartnell with the stories that you've heard of him not taking criticism well and also really not liking getting shown up when he messes things up, and which is hilarious because he messes things up, like he flubs over a line immediately in this episode,
and also just after his reaction to Peter Purves incorrectly saying a line, he makes his own flub by saying, I prefer walking to climbing any day. The original line was, I prefer walking to climbing any day. He said, I prefer walking to any day, and I hate climbing.
He's so good. He's so good. See, I do not think I like William Hartnell. I do think I like his incarnation of the Doctor just for how weird he is. Like I love his hms. His hms make me laugh every time. Also, whenever he gets excited, he gets this weird like giddy voice, where he's like, whoa, whoa.
So I don't like William Hartnell as a person, but I'm kind of warming up to him as the Doctor, but a lot of the time you'll see William Hartnell like 40% level performance.
I know.
Where he's struggling to remember a line because he basically had dementia. That's a sad thing. We kind of make fun of it, but he had a hard time working on this show.
Yeah, he does look about 90,000 years old. He is like 50, which is insane to think about. That's a 50-year-old man in front of me. But he's fun. He's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
When he's at 100% performance,
Yeah.
which he does get 100% performance in parts 3 and 4 of his story.
Ooh.
He is really good in parts 3 and 4. I think that week vacation he took
Just
in
gave
episode
him
2
a
really
nice
helps him.
breather. When Hartnell wants to bring it, he can bring it, and he's so good. It's just a shame he definitely didn't have the energy to bring it every episode, because it would have been just gangbuster.
And I don't even blame him, to be honest. He had poor health, and also he was working 40 weeks a year on Doctor Who.
And some of the
40
episodes,
a year
and some of the episodes sucked, and he probably thought they sucked as well. He was probably like, "This is a garbage episode. I don't care about this one." This guy's dressed up like a giant bee. This guy's just. I've been acting my entire life. I've been in movies, and I'm next to a guy that's like a giant bee.
I think one of the biggest examples of William Hartnell not liking the production quality is in The Web Planet, when one of those hair dryers comes across him, and he gives the unscripted line of, "Oh my god, you're putting one of these hair dryers above my head again, really?" which he adds to it.
Amazing. But the Doctor also really weirdly in this episode decides that he's just going to go off by himself. He's like, screw you guys, I'm going away. Screw you, you don't come with me. And they're like, why can't we come with you? And he's like, I don't like you, bye. And he just kind of storms away. The weirdest choice ever.
Yeah, so I've been watching season 2 quite a bit because the Blu-ray just came out like a month ago, and every episode he splits up with his companions at the start of every story. I don't know why.
Yeah, season 2's rough. It's rough. It's not great. But he splits up, and Vicky and Steven also leaving the Time Meddler, the monk, alone with the TARDIS, and he's tries to get into it. He's very curious by it. He leans against it. The door definitely doesn't open. Don't worry about it. And he's like, "Oh, this is interesting." And then he goes to what looks like check his watch, but there's nothing on his wrist. I mean, why would a monk in 1066 have a watch anyway? And then we get this insane zoom into his face. It's just like this rapid push in, where he's like, "Oh, my watch is missing." But it's a lot of fun, and I think this episode opens so strongly. What's mental though is like nothing has happened, and we are 12 minutes in. We are halfway through this episode, and there's really no plot happening so far. But for some reason, it's super compelling. I think this episode one's so well written.
Yeah, it's super well written. I think Dennis Spooner at his strongest is when he writes all the TARDIS companions at the same time in the same room. Like all the TARDIS scenes of Dennis Spooner is just fantastic. And yeah, it's just 12 minutes of essentially just establishing what Doctor Who is to viewers. Mm-hmm. And it is still entertaining, even though 60 years has passed, and we know what Doctor Who is by now. Mm-hmm. We don't need 12 minutes to explain what Doctor Who is, but it's just so fun watching Stephen not believe him, be skeptical. Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting because we never really get that, and it's just fun to watch all three of them together. Their chemistry is really solid.
It really is. The episode continues with the Doctor exploring around some tents, looking at some recent kills from a hunt, before being pinned to a wall by a piece of wood in a very funny shot. I think Hartnell's face is hilarious when that thing gets pushed right into his neck. We then cut to the monk off doing some stuff, which is worth mentioning here how great the set is for the monastery where the monk is. Like the brickwork, the door, everything. You don't see into the studio, you don't see above the walls. Everything has texture to it. It feels lived in. It looks genuine. It looks like they're in a genuine monastery. Yeah. You know, it's impressively good.
Yeah, every time I watch it, I'm just like, yeah, this is 100% real. I'm never not convinced by it. It really looks really solid, and it looks huge.
Yeah.
But, it's just a tiny area of a tiny set, It's it's really impressive work. I'll tell you that much. It's really solid.
It is very good indeed. We then cut to the Saxons doing some stuff, and who gives a crap about what they're doing. They're on a cliffside and the sky looks really cool, and they're looking down and they're like, oh, money or whatever, who cares. We then cut to the doctor with a human lady person whose name do we ever catch?
Edith. Her name is Edith.
Edith, right. And she's pouring the doctor a flagon of mead for him to drink out of. So the doctor's just sitting getting steaming as he's chatting with this lady. And it's a very, very well written scene. It's a very well put together little bit where the doctor's like talking as if he knows what's going on, but he's letting the woman correct him every now and then so he can try and figure out when and where exactly he is, and it's wonderful to watch the conversation go back and forth and the doctor figure out exactly where he is.
I really like it as like it's like a little game the doctor and his companions can play. You can just wind up in a random place and see who can get the context of where they are or when they are the fastest. That's a good idea of a game we could play.
Yeah, for sure. That would be very fun. And the doctor, when he figures out that he's in 1066, it is amazing because he's like talking and he's like, oh, well, if this guy is king and this guy is dead, then that must mean we're in 1066. Like, he gets so high pitched when he says 1066. It's great. Excited Hartnell Doctor is my favorite Hartnell version of the Doctor, because when he gets excited, he gets so weird. He starts being like, "Oh, it's a balmy night, such a balmy night." Like,
yeah, and according to Douglas Camfield, according to Donald Tosh, William Hartnell was kind of a nightmare during this scene. I'll read what he says in Doctor Who magazine. It was also a good story to start on because it had been written by Dennis Spooner, my predecessor, so I didn't really have to do very much work on it, except make sure everyone learnt their lines. That was a problem for most of the cast, apart from Bill Hartnell, who was never very fond of sticking to the script. I remember nearly blowing a gasket during the first episode when he suddenly addressed the camera and started explaining, yes, William the Conqueror is going to come here and win the Battle of Hastings in 1066, etc., etc., and proceeded to give away the rest of the plot. Of course, none of this had been in the script, and we were all supposed to be ever so grateful he had remembered vaguely what Dennis's dialogue was, and he thought that he thought that we'd be disappointed if he didn't manage to get enough of the plot across. For some technical reason, we weren't able to shoot it again, and so it had to stay in.
oh wow.
Which is... he barely remembered his lines and instead
just made some stuff up
vaguely about.
Amazing. Well, he makes it up very well. It comes across very naturalistic, but that is that's a hilarious story.
I'm not sure if it was this episode or episode 3 because he has very similar lines in episode 3 as well. So I'm just maybe confusing the two episodes. But also this scene did have to be reshot quite a large portion of it because in the background they played too much of a chanting because they only obtained the copyright to do a few minutes. So I guess the chanting was actually done live.
Weird.
It was played on a tape live.
What?
Like rather than dubbed later in editing. It doesn't make any sense.
What is a strange way of doing it?
So yeah, when you're watching the scene, you'll just hear suddenly it stops playing and it starts playing a few seconds later. It's very strange.
That is very strange indeed.
Yeah, Edith leaves the doctor for a while and he kind of wanders around listening to the chanting going on, and then he suddenly hears it gets distorted for a bit.
Yeah.
And he becomes suspicious about why it's being distorted, and he asks Omen to come back out. Much grumpier than he was earlier.
Yeah,
by the way.
He's kind of such a mood change.
He's kind of like, "Get out now, woman!"
Yeah.
It's very strange.
It's such a weird shift.
But she basically tells him where the monastery is.
Mm-hmm. And it's, I really like the subtle but not too subtle of the chanting getting distorted. It just lets you know that whoa, that was weird. Something's not quite right here. Did I hear that right? Maybe it's something with the TV. Where because it doesn't last too long. It's just this. It's a few seconds where it's just like, and you're like, what the fuck? I thought it was such a great way. I think they do a really good job building up you know, the like reveal of the Time Meddler messing with. You get like bits drip fed things, you know, here and there.
Yeah.
It's so well done. And speaking of things well done, the next scene is not that, as we cut to Stephen and Vicky as they're walking through the woods, and they're like, oh, let's just walk through the woods. I don't want to walk through the woods anymore. I'm tired. I'm going to sit down. Oh, wait, we're getting followed. And then Stephen is like, I'm going to just attack this random dude. Like, he just attacks him. He just runs at him, starts trying to hit him, because he picks a thing up off the ground.
There's a moment where Vicky's like, okay, maybe we should follow him to make sure he's like friendly or whatever. And she's like, you should listen to me for once, which is, I really like that characterization of Vicky. She's very inconsistent between each episode, honestly, but in this episode I like her for, she's taken the lead.
Yeah.
In terms of the dynamic between,
Steven.
What's his name again?
Steven.
Steven.
Who are you? Me? Are
She's
you
taking
me
the
now?
lead
Are
over
you
Steven.
doing a me? I don't remember the names.
But you know, if you compare her to Susan, you know, Susan would be just screaming.
She would be
her head off by
screaming.
this
She would just be
point.
screaming constantly. But Steven beats up the dude, or actually Steven gets beat up by the dude. It's a terrible fight where it looks like they're gonna kiss the entire time, and then he gets punched. But Steven manages to grapple the thing out of his hand that he was holding, which was a watch, which is our first real instance of things are not quite right here in 10th century England, are they?
And you know, nowadays we're used to seeing these kind of things in Doctor Who. You know, a story set in the past could have anything from like a mobile phone or something. But some woman in 1965 complained about this scene. She said, "I didn't understand this at all. Since when were there wristwatches and gramophones in 1066? I thought this was an absolute waste of time watching something that didn't make sense."
Oh, she did not. That went right over her head. It went right over her head.
Yeah, they did a wide pool of like trying to find out what the audience thought of this episode, because obviously it was something very new for Doctor Who, and a lot of people just did not understand why there were future things in episodes set in the past. They were so confused.
Well, you got to tune in next week and not find out any information because nothing's going to happen. But you got to tune in the week after that. But the Doctor walks into the monastery where he finds the gramophone playing out the monk chanting, which he is just absolutely smitten by. He just starts giggling like a child when he sees it. It's so hilarious and sweet. Where he's just laughing to himself. I'm like, I don't get it. Like,
yeah, I don't get it myself. Why is he laughing about it?
what's the joke? Like.
Maybe he's just happy. I don't know. I don't get it myself. Why is he happy about it? Like,
I don't know. Maybe he just thinks it's Time Lord humor, you know. But then he goes to leave the monastery, but giant like bamboo bars fall down in front of him, and he's locked in. And the monk comes up and starts laughing in his face. It's a really strange way to end the episode, but that is the cliffhanger, because we can't have a cliffhanger where the Doctor isn't in mortal peril at the end of every episode. And that's somehow, I was at the end of episode 1 already. Like,
yeah.
This episode flew by. I think it's really well paced. I think it's really well put together. I think it's really well acted. I don't think there's a story in this episode, but, you know, there's even less story in the next episode, which we're about to jump right into. But I think this is the strongest episode out of the two, for sure.
If episode 1 was like Modern Who, this would be like 10 minutes into this episode.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like... Or less than 10
It would be,
you know, like the first...
You know, the first... Maybe even the cold open. Like...
Like, the first 12 minutes is just establishing what the show is. And then the next, like, 5 minutes is just William Hartnell being weird old man in the forest of a woman.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's a weirdly paced episode, but somehow it works. I don't know why this episode is so engaging for me. I just get sucked into it.
It's really entertaining, and everyone's just doing their absolute best. You know, this is like one of the best the William Hartnell era has ever looked, I would say.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
Really, it's a really good production.
It's aged really well.
And everyone's just, yeah. But anyway, you want to jump into episode 2?
Yeah, let us jump in to episode 2.
Well, I'm not convinced. I'll tell you what. When he comes out again, I'm going to try something. So whatever happens, don't say a word. Nothing. Okay?
Okay.
I apologize for keeping you waiting.
It's quite all right.
I'm afraid the answer is not the one you'd wish to hear.
I hadn't seen him.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, perhaps you'd keep a lookout for him.
Oh, I certainly will, yes.
Are you sure you'll remember his description?
Description, let me see. Long white hair, a black cloak, and rather strange check.
That's it. You've got it. Fine. Thanks. Thanks very much indeed.
You're very welcome, my son. I'm sorry I couldn't have done more. Good day.
Good day.
We didn't give him a description of the doctor.
I know we did. Well, that means he must have seen him, doesn't it? He's keeping him prisoner in there. I'll stake my life on that, Vicky.
Well, he was pretty stupid to give himself away like that.
It's easily done.
Too easy. I don't think we've been as clever as we think we have.
Oh, now what does that mean?
Well, look. Say he's the one who's tricked us. Say he gave himself away deliberately like that in order to make us think we'd fooled him.
Vicky, there's only one way we can find out what's going on in there. That's to break in.
That's exactly what he wants us to do.
Well, possibly, but we've no other choice. We'll wait till it's dark. Come on.
Episode 2 begins exactly where we left off episode 1, with the Doctor being trapped in a prison. We then immediately jump to, like, the next day, I guess it is, because the monk's making breakfast from the world's most insane toaster. I've never seen a toaster launch bread into the air like that.
Yeah, it's like one of those Wallace and Gromit toasters, you know, when Wallace has a machine set up, so it pops out to the toaster, jumps onto his plate, and also the jam kind of splats onto it.
Yeah, it's
and also surprise, surprise, people complained about this episode because they were like, toasters and suctions doesn't make any sense. I don't understand.
People were dumb. It's a time travel show. Yeah. Oh, okay.
But I can understand.
Yeah, it's never happened
episodes.
before. They've never done it before, you know. But why would you complain? Why wouldn't you just be like intrigued? Like what have they got planned? Why not wait for it to be over and then see if you've got questions? Why start asking questions and complaints on episode 2 of 4?
Yeah. There were some people who were like, yeah, my theory is this guy is a time traveler, and they were obviously right, you know, like, it's obviously setting up that he's a time traveler.
Yeah.
It's mental.
But he also makes himself eggs and then pours oil onto his eggs, which must be a thing from the 60s. It must just be a 1960s way of cooking eggs, because I've never seen anyone do that. It seems like a really greasy way to eat your eggs. You just have the world's greasiest plate afterwards, you know? I guess... The only reason I could think, sorry, I'm going to go real deep into this. The only reason I could think about pouring oil onto your eggs would be to make sure that the top part of the egg is cooked evenly as well, because sometimes you can get a bit of raw egg on the top. But the way to solve that is just flip over your egg in the pan. You know, just cook it for like 2-3 seconds even on the top. Just get a nice cooked layer. You don't even need so you still have a nice runny yolk, but you've got the cooked bit on the top. You don't need to go pouring oil all over your plate. It's ridiculous.
Maybe it's the way they do it on Gallifrey.
Maybe, but
you know,
but like, why would they do that in Gallifrey? What do they?
I don't know.
But
maybe we just figured something out that we haven't.
Yeah, maybe.
But this is the point
have to try it.
Really point out, but this is the point of the episode. I should point out that Peter Butterworth is playing the role of a Time Meddler. At this point, he was only known for like his Carry On movies. Have you ever seen any of these Carry On movies?
I've never seen any of the Carry On movies. What I know about them is that they've aged very poorly, apparently.
You know, ITV3 used to show them all the time. I think they still do, but it's heavily edited now. But whenever I used to watch for like 5 minutes, there's always humor like, oh yeah, these men are looking at women undressing.
Okay.
And that kind of humor.
Great. Right. Yeah. Superb.
He's like the most prolific actor from that franchise of movies, and Bertie Lambert picked him out, and it was a huge risk at the time because casting somebody like him was weird for like a role of a villain, but I like the more humorous side of Peter Butterworth. He's really good in this story.
He is very good in this story for sure, and he delivers his weirdly cooked eggs and toast to a door behind of which the Doctor definitely is. Don't worry about it. You don't see him just for no reason. He's definitely behind that door, where he pushes in the food. He wakes him up. He's like, oh, breakfast is here, and then the Doctor throws his piss in his face. It's 100% because he's got the only other liquid we see him bring in is a hot cup of tea, because it's a hot cup of tea with some eggs and toast, right? And when he gets the liquid thrown in his face, one, it's a lot of liquid, way more than you'd have in that tiny teacup, way more. And two, he doesn't go, oh my god, my face is burning from the hot tea you've just thrown at me. It's piss. The Doctor threw his piss in the face of this monk.
Maybe it's a cup of water. The Time Meddler gave him the night before.
It's a cup of a type of water. Bodily waste. It used to be water, and now
But yeah, William Hartnell only gets like 2 lines in this episode. Obviously, they were recorded the week after this episode was shot, because last week the schedule went overboard and he didn't have enough time to record his lines. So Peter Butterworth is basically just acting to nothing here, apart from a man
throwing piss.
Man on the other side of the
a props man throwing his own piss. That bit was real. He didn't know why. He was like, "Why can't we use water?" He said, "Nah, it's got to be piss." But we then cut to the really boring stuff of this episode, which is the Saxon / Stephen / Vicky storyline, as Vicky is asleep alone in the woods getting creeped on by a Saxon dude, which is just, Stephen is not believing that they're in 1066, so he feels completely safe leaving his friend alone in the woods, who is a woman. It's such a smart and safe decision to make.
Dude, even in 1965, or even in 2022, that's a bad idea.
Ridiculous. But he comes back. He comes back, and there's some fun banter between the two. The two of them do have really good chemistry together, where he's like, for breakfast you can have, what type of berry is it again? Like blackberry or whatever?
Blackberries.
Yeah, he's like, you can have blackberries,
or some
blackberries. And Vicky's like, I don't want either of those, so I'm just gonna go hungry. I guess she doesn't like blackberries. But this,
I'm glad, even though you split up the Doctor with his companions, but the companions do have some chemistry together and they do get some fun lines together. Whereas, in Flux, they had to split characters up, and Yaz just looked around.
Yeah.
What would the Doctor do?
What would the Doctor do? I don't know. But yeah, there's also a really fun bit of jokes here where Vicky's like, oh, I wonder what time it is, if only we could tell, and Stephen immediately shoves the watch in her face and is like, it's 5:20, which it really made me laugh. It's fantastic. But then they get assaulted by the Saxons and we cut away to some more fun stuff. As we go back to the monk, as he is pretending to, he says he's meditating, but he's very clearly reading a piece of parchment. So I guess he was doing two things. He was meditating and reading at the same time.
I mean, I guess you can do both. Meditating isn't like a set rule. If you have to close your eyes.
No, but
look at
meditating is like clearing your mind, isn't it? It's like being at one with yourself and the planet. And he's like, and also I'm gonna catch up on the news.
But maybe a form of meditating for a religious person could be catching up on
the Bible or whatever. Yeah, it could be. But he gets approached by two villagers who are like, oh, we brought you some provisions or whatnot. And he's like, awesome, bye. They leave, and then he whaps out some binoculars, which is just, it's a fantastic visual. I really like all the stuff with the monk using modern technology. It just makes me, I say modern technology, 50-year-old technology. It really makes me laugh.
And also, I just like watching him. You don't understand what his plan is yet. You don't find out until like episode 3 or 4 entirely. But it's just so much fun watching him just pull out that pair of binoculars. He's just such a funny actor. Just his body movements are just hilarious. It's really funny stuff.
It really is. And we follow him as he goes to sit on the cliffside looking out into the ocean with his binoculars, and he sees a whole boat of Vikings approaching, a whole boat of shirtless, barely dressed men, to which he goes, "At last! At last!" Read into that what you will, but, you know...
Yeah, and, a lot of stock footage of men that won't appear in this actual
Yeah, we never see any of these actors again. But we then cut away to some really boring stuff, as the Saxons are arguing over...
Oh, no. We cut away to a door with the doctor at the other end saying, "Open this door, open this door."
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was such an important part of the plot.
But, you know, that moment really made me think the doctor doesn't have his sonic screwdriver yet.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, I mean, depends on the lock. If it's like a wooden lock, he'd still be screwed. You know, it's.
But yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe it's like the lock from Day of the Doctor.
Yeah, although there wasn't a lock in the Day of the Doctor. That was the whole point. The door was open. But yeah, the Saxons are arguing whether or not they should let Vicky and Stephen go, or whether or not they should just kill them, and it's really boring, and they have a wee kerfuffle that's definitely really well choreographed, and they decide that they're just going to let them go and give them some food for the road, and then Vicky and Stephen leave, and we get to find out that the Saxons need to go back to working in the field right now. That we stay and we watch them all walk off in the field as one Saxon looks very grumpy that that they've let them go. He wants them to be dead. I really don't care at all about the Saxon stuff in this episode.
Yeah. The problem with episode 2 is they found a clever way of writing William Hartnell out because he was on holiday. Imprison him and put him in prison is a smart idea because he's out of the episode for the entire episode. But you also have to wait until the Doctor is free from prison for anything interesting to happen, really.
It is 20 minutes of pure filler. Like, you know, it is. You could skip this episode and probably be completely okay going straight into episode 3, because I do not think there's anything in this episode that is of importance, you know?
You know, the minor interactions between the companions and the Time Meddler is fun. Mm-hmm. Them just trying to sneak into the monastery, but that's like 5 minutes at most.
Yeah, but it's not really mega necessary, is it? You know.
Aye.
The episode continues with a grappling hook being thrown up a cliff, and some Vikings that were definitely the same guys we just saw on the boat. Do not worry about it. They're 100% the same people. Come up that cliff, and they're like, "Oh, we're on a stealth mission for the king, so don't get caught, and don't do anything that's going to get you caught or compromised. Only fight if you have to." These are definitely rules the Vikings will remember, and they will not rape the first person they see. Yeah. Then we cut to a genuinely very good scene as Stephen and Vicky approach the monastery and chat with the monk. And this is it's a very fun back and forth between mainly Stephen and the monk, where, you know, the monk's trying to dismiss them, and Stephen's like, "Hey, but we're looking for our friend, you know, we're looking for the doctor. Have you seen him? And what about the other monks? Have they seen him? Oh, by the way, do you remember what we said he looked like?" And the monk tells them what the doctor looks like, even though they never told him in the first place. They were like, "Haha, we're so clever, we outwitted you." And then Vicky, even better, goes, "Wait, hang on, I don't think we're as smart as we think we are. I think that he wants us to think that we're being smart and outsmarting him." And she's playing fucking 4D chess, you know. She's real smart in these episodes.
Because at first Stephen's like, "Hey, can you ask the other monks to see if they've seen him?"
Mm-hmm.
And he goes in to pretend to ask all the monks, but really he's listening at the door, which is what I do at work when somebody asks, "Hey, is there any of this prime juice?" You know, that's a big thing right now. Prime juice in the back store, and I'm like, I'll just walk through, look at my phone for like 2 minutes, pretend I had a look, and then say no, because I know there's definitely no prime juice back there, but they'll ask anyway. Oh God, do you know the deal about the prime juice? It's Logan Paul and KSI.
Yeah, I know it's apparently hard to get, and
yeah, we had 25 packs of it delivered to our store. They all sold out in a day and a half.
Oh wow,
which is absolutely insane. And every day, like 4 or 5 times a day, I get asked, "Hey, do you have any prime juice left?"
Isn't it?
I don't understand.
Isn't it just like a crap energy drink?
Yeah, apparently it's just a crap energy drink.
Brilliant. We then cut to probably the weirdest tonally scene in the entire story. It's so strange, but we cut to Edith, who was the Saxon lady that was chatting with the doctor and feeding him all that mead. She's alone outside her house, and she hears a noise, so she grabs a spear and she starts walking. The music's going. It's this weirdly tense scene, and then she is surrounded by Vikings, grabbed and taken away back into her house. And it is shocking for one, Doctor Who, two, 1965, whenever the hell this was. You know, it's mental that this was on TV and just nobody could, this is a kids TV show that you would not see it on today's kids shows, you know.
For a moment, we both misremembered the episode, thinking, oh, maybe the Vikings actually killed her. Maybe that's what's being. We both knew they raped her.
Yeah.
But we both thought that maybe she was dead, and we could infer that maybe they just killed her. But no, she's awake, she's conscious,
she's completely just shut. She's cannot move. She's so terror struck by everything that's happened to her. She's completely frozen. It's horrifying. It's genuinely a really adult moment in this episode that comes out of nowhere.
And it's so weird because the Time Meddler is the storyline in general. It's just it's really comedic, actually.
Yeah.
And we just have this one random rape scene in the middle of the episode, and near the end of the episode too, which, understandably, if you want to do a pure historical, that could be a reason why. Maybe it was an idea that was thrown away. Or maybe it was an idea that came at an earlier point when we wanted to do a Viking storyline, and we just wanted to do it as a pure historical, and then the whole comedic angle came afterwards. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe they would have got away with it because they never explicitly say what happened. Yeah. They never explicitly say what happens to her. It's just you infer it based off, your knowledge of history and the performances that happen. And maybe that's how they were like, I'll go over the kids' heads. We'll just say they beat her up or something, but the adults will be able to be like, oh Christ, this was a bit dark, but it's still it's such a strange choice for this episode to suddenly take that turn, I know. And it leads.
It's like the only thing. It's the only thing I'll remember episode 2 for the rape scene.
Yeah, and it leads to the greatest choreographed fight in Doctor Who history, as the Saxon men grab their weapons to go and hunt down the Vikings that did this, and they all have a fight, and it's definitely thought out beforehand, rehearsed and structured, and everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's got weapons training. Everybody is fully prepared and knows what they're doing in this fight. It's not just a kerfuffle and a complete mess where people are just kind of like, oh, is this my spot? Do I go now? It's hilariously bad.
Yeah, you can definitely tell we just did not have enough time to rehearse anything that's going on in this scene. It just does not look good, and it doesn't look good for the camera either. It's really awkward. It's really, really awkward. But, considering this is episode 40 out of 40 in season 2 of Doctor Who, and it was only rehearsed in 5 days, we can kind of give him some slack, honestly.
Yeah. We then cut to Stephen and Vicky as they climb through a window back into the monastery, and there's this really great moment where both Stephen and Vicky at the same time say, "Follow me," and walk off in different directions, with Stephen being the one backtracking and then deciding to follow Vicky. I absolutely love it when Classic Who suddenly gives their female characters agency and makes them actual characters and not just there to be damsel in distresses that scream all the time or get knocked out by a plunger,
Yeah, this whole episode, Vicky takes the lead, which is really refreshing because Vicky is also the youngest, but she's also the most experienced in terms of time travel and out of Stephen and Vicky, so it really works that she takes the lead over Stephen, because Stephen's still... I think he's got it right now. I think he understands that he's in the past, but he's still slightly skeptical, I think.
Yeah, Vicky is she is superb in this episode. I really, really like. I throughout the story, really, I don't know for the next 2 episodes, but at least in these first 2 episodes, she's really, really well written, and I'm a big fan of her in them. In the meanwhile, the Saxons are also on their way to the monastery because one of them got injured in the fight. That is important information for later on, as Vicky and Stephen discover the oh my god, what's it called?
Gramophone.
Yeah, the gramophone playing out the monk chanting, just like how the Doctor did. However, they don't think it's quite as funny. And
they discover it 23 minutes in, and the Doctor also discovered it 23 minutes in. It's really weird that both moments happen at the exact same time.
Yeah, it was because episode 2 is just episode 1, but worse. They then instantly find where the Doctor is being locked up, or where they suspect the Doctor's being locked up for some reason, even though they're like, oh, the Doctor must be in here, he must be asleep. It could be another monk. They don't know that there's only one monk in here. They're just making that assumption. Like, they're just like, oh no, this is definitely the Doctor. I don't know why we think that, but it definitely is.
It's also not really convincing because it's just like I guess it's like a rug.
It's like it's just like a pile of furs. Like,
yeah, you wouldn't think that, oh, somebody was here but they left. No, you just think, oh, there's just a rug on the bed.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, the monk gets distracted by the Saxons, who then help them just walk into the monastery, like, we need help, and he's like, oh, well, just come on in then. And that's the last we see of the monk in this episode. Kind of a lackluster way to say goodbye to him in the episode, really. Yeah. And then Vicky and Stephen take the blankets off the bed, expecting to see the Doctor, but he's on holiday, and all they see is furs in the bed instead, and that's the cliffhanger for this episode. It's also such a lackluster ending.
Also, one thing we forgot to mention, but the door to the prison that the Doctor's stuck in changes between episodes. So I don't know why that happens.
Don't worry about it. But yeah, that's the cliffhanger for this episode. It's such a strange. I think it's probably one of the weaker cliffhangers we've covered, and we've covered some weak cliffhangers, but this is definitely up there for probably one of the weakest cliffhangers in our classic Who deep dives. But that is the end of episode 2. What did you think about this episode and just the entire part 1, part 2 story altogether?
Yeah. Episode 1 is really fucking strong. We haven't spoken about episode 1 as a whole, but yeah, episode 1 is really strong. It's a fun introduction to the characters and the settings. Episode 2 really lets us down. It's not that strong of an episode. You can tell we're just kind of writing around William Hartnell being off. And also the rape scene. I kind of like the rape scene, which sounds weird to say in context. But I like how Doctor Who went there. You know what I mean? They kind of showed the vicious side of the Vikings. It's interesting that they include that in the episode, but it feels out of context compared to the rest of the episode, because the Time Meddler is just a fun character. He's like a goofy character. So why are we, like, he kind of sets the tone for the story. It's a goofy kind of story with a rape.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
Yeah. I agree with that. I really, really liked episode 1. I was surprised at how much I was sucked into it, because for me, especially with the first Doctor, a lot of the stories, sometimes the pacing is like so horrendous. I'm like, oh, I'm distracted. I need to look at my phone or do something else, or just stop watching it for now. But episode 1 sucked me in completely. It's the fastest 20 minutes that of my life. It just zips by. And then episode 2 undoes all that goodwill that episode 1 builds up, because there is no plot to episode 2. It is just watching people walk around the woods for 20 minutes while the monk is like, ooh, Vikings are here, that's fun. It's a garbage episode for garbage people.
I'm looking forward to reviewing the next 2 episodes, because William Hartnell and Peter Butterworth are so fucking good to get around. They are so entertaining. And this is, I'm very hyped for us to do the next podcast.
Yeah. And that will be next week, as we look at parts 3 and 4 of this story and wrap up the first Doctor for this year, which is exciting. It's the last time we'll see Hartnell for 365 days. But yeah,
I guess we are doing Twice Upon a Time near Christmas. We're seeing the first Doctor again.
But
now?
that feels like an impossibly long time away. but it will come quicker than you expect. But yeah, we'll be looking at parts 3 and 4 next week as we wrap up the Time Meddler. In the meantime, you can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts in audio form. There is a lot of links in the description. Make sure you leave 5-star reviews on whichever app you listen to, and recommend a friend to listen to the podcast. We're trying to get our listenership up a bit. You can also find it in video form on YouTube. I would be waving, but my webcam is broken right now, so it's just a picture of Evil Dan. You can find us on YouTube at Who Watches Who. I think it's youtube.com/@WhoWatchesWhoPod will take you there. Again, there is a link in the description if you prefer listening to your podcast in video form for whatever reason. I've never understood it personally. You can also find us on Twitter at WatchesDoctor, on Facebook at Who Watches Who. You can find me on Twitter at Cloth223. And is there any other social medias I need to plug at the minute?
No, I don't. I don't think so. Your Twitch, maybe.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitch at something orange. Those streams might be gone for the next few months. I've moved house and the internet is not so good in this new place. But I might move again in like 4 months' time and then start streaming again. Who knows? Life is a roller coaster, and I move all the time.
Life is a highway. I'm gonna ride it all.
Yeah, exactly that. But thank you very much for listening to this episode of Who Watches Who, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.